All right, good morning, everybody. We are Reseller Revenue Patreon group, and today we are talking about sourcing, which we talk about sourcing a lot. We talk about sourcing in many different ways and never run out of things to talk about. I think the main thing that's been coming to my attention lately from people asking me questions is that, what sourcing is not one size fits all. It's really not with people. We talk about where we can get the best stuff, how we can source online versus in person. We talk about all that stuff. But what I think sometimes we forget about sourcing is the way we can sell the exact same things and we actually need to be sourcing differently. So I run into that a lot with people wanting to maybe source exactly what I source, or we see somebody on the call and we want to source what they source because they're making lots of money, and that looks like a good idea because who doesn't want to make the same amount of money, right? But it's not it's not true, I guess, for lack of better terms. It's not realistic for us all to source the same. Just like when I say that we're all going to hit different financial milestones at a different pace, so is sourcing. And I think sometimes it's so easy to chase or want what the other people have because of we see somebody doing good, we want to mimic that. That's human nature. However, if we get ahead of ourselves sourcing, we can do ourselves a whole lot more harm than good. So we need to consider what stage of business you're in. What's your inventory capacity? What's your cash flow look like? How much time and ability do you have with listing? And the biggest thing for me is knowledge, right? So, especially in my niche with jewelry, you cannot source the same as somebody else that has a different level of knowledge than you, whether it's good or bad or in between. And I think
Hmm.
we've all been there. If you've been reselling for any period of time, whether it's clothing, jewelry, shoes, whatever it is, I think we've all tried to outsource ourselves. I know I have in the past. And that came in the form of me wanting to cherry pick higher end jewelry when I wasn't ready to be cherry picking high end jewelry. Because for one, if you don't know, and it's the same with clothing, if you can't spot a fake a mile away or know what to look for in a really good fake, does not matter what your niche is, you have no business sourcing in that pool, that level. Right. And I'll stand behind that because you sell one too many fakes or even one fake of the wrong brand on eBay, you're done. You can get banned for that. So if you don't have that knowledge behind you, then I think you got to take it down a little bit till you do learn that. And lots of times the only way we learn is by feeling, touching, having that experience behind us. So there's a few people that have reached out to me that are interested in selling jewelry. And the most common thing I tell them is to buy a small lot and just get your hands in there and research everything in that lot. You will start to realize what's junk. You'll start to realize what's not any good. But to jump right into the higher end field before you've ever experienced the Sarah Coventrys of the world or the plain brands of clothing of the world, I think is foolish. And it ends up usually backfiring. And like I said, I think we've all done this where we want to jump that step. We want to go right to all the good stuff. And while I tell you to only source the good stuff, there's a difference between what's good for you and what's good for me. And every single person in this group, it's going to be a little bit different what our good is and what we're capable of sourcing. I think we only look at what we want to source monetarily wise, but we need to stay in our lane when it comes to what we're capable of sourcing responsibly, right? I think we've all been out of our league a time or two where we sourced something we had no business spending money on, we had no business jumping after, and then we either have I hope I get out of this without losing my shirt type of moment. I have definitely been there, where I jumped in buying stuff I had no business buying yet. And so the key points I want to make on the sourcing end of it is of course we have the people that love the sourcing more than the listing, right? And that'll get you into trouble every time. So if you have, a year's worth of inventory sitting around, for one, we just shouldn't be sourcing. And you guys know I think that if you have no idea how much of a queue you have in the amount of days, you know that I don't think you should be sourcing. So that's first, right? And that's not really what our topic is today, but just throwing it out there because every chance I get, I try to remind everybody of that. because we still have oversourcers out there, which you guys know I think will kill your business financially. And then the other is cash flow versus inventory growth, right? So this is what I'm seeing the most of right now is people wanting to spend up, pay up for good stuff, but they really don't have any inventory to list. And then what's going to happen to them? They're paying up for good items, let's say 4 good items. They don't have anything to list. All their cash flow is tied up in 4 items. So it's very hard unless those items sell right away and they have the knowledge to know what's going to sell right away or what's going to sit at what price point. So unless they are super able to zone that in, they're not going to be able to continue their business at all because the cash flow is tied up in those few items. Now, am I saying go buy a pile of junk? No, but if you're not to the point yet where your business has healthy cash flow, we can't be tying up our income in 2 long-term items or 3 long-tail items. Your business will come to a screeching halt. So that's when we really need to consider where are we at? And that's going to be different for everyone. So it's better to have a little bit of cash on hand than to have every single dollar tied up in your inventory or in things you haven't even processed yet, which is even worse, right? So when we're new, we need to be learning our category, building our business, right? And we still need to source, but I feel like when we are newer, we need to maybe work on the lowest possible cost of goods, but still a good sellable, flippable item, right? So yes, if you find a good item at a really low cost that you can flip that's higher end, absolutely pick it up. But what I'm saying is we shouldn't be shooting for the stars yet because we don't know if that star is a fake or not. And we don't know if it really is good or not. And it's a lot easier if we make a $2 mistake than when you make a $50 mistake. And I still make mistakes. I can absorb those mistakes easier. And that's not me being full of myself. It's just a fact. You know, I can take a $500 lot risk. And if it's crap, I'll figure it out and I'll get out of it. And it sucks, but it's not going to hurt me as badly as somebody just starting out with no cash flow. And that's just a fact. And that's just part of the growth that we all will go through. When you kind of got your feet underneath you, you kind of know the category you want to sell in, you're starting to learn. Again, we are knowledge. And like in jewelry, I see some people get too attached to the books, right? I love jewelry books. You guys know that's one of the only things I hoard is jewelry books. I love jewelry books, but those jewelry books are not practical selling today research, right? So while they're important and we can add them to what we learn from, the solds on eBay are, if you're selling on eBay, assuming most of us are selling on eBay, that is what's going to get you farther. I think we should combine them both, but those books aren't going to tell you what's going to sell today or what price they're selling at today, right? So don't get too over leveraged with your knowledge. Also, we need to be then working on sourcing to maintain long-term listing rhythm and moderate, and we can maybe bump our cost of goods up a little bit because we're getting some knowledge behind us and we know what's selling and we know what's going to sell quickly. So we're just starting to get there. And I think a lot of us are in the intermediate section for longer than we'd like to admit. And we want to be in advanced, right? We want to be somewhere we're not yet, right? I don't play in the high high, the high dollar stakes that often. I do some, but I don't that often. For me to drop over $10 on an item is pretty rare still. I will do it, but it's not that common for me. I mean, I have, but I don't that much. So for a new seller or an intermediate seller in the niche to come to me and say, I got all this high-end stuff and it was $20 a piece, that scares me a little bit because we shouldn't even be in that yet. We got to stay in our lane. When you get to be established, now we're just refining our reselling. And I feel like I'm probably in the established. I don't know that I'm probably in between established and advanced. And I think I've paid my dues, right? And I think everybody, doesn't matter what niche you're in, we go through a lot of due paying sometimes. And I hope this group, that's part of what I want this group to do for us, is to shave off some of what your due paying is, because you can learn from mine and the screw ups I've had and the screw ups that you see, or the struggles we see each other go through. in all the different niches that we sell in. So then we're just scaling, refining, we're getting efficient, we're getting our return on investment down. And when we start talking in terms of return on investment, you will find that the advanced sellers are oftentimes more careful. Like, I'm either one way or the other. I'll take a risk if I think it's good, but most of the time I'm pickier about my cost of goods being low and efficient now than I was when I should have been worried about it before, because I know how important it is on the bottom line. That buying correctly and not taking unnecessary risks and buying with low cost of goods is more important to me now than ever, because I'm scaling. And if you scale and you're only throwing out the big numbers, but you're not sure yet, it's going to bankrupt you. So we have to stay within our focus and our knowledge and where we're at. So I think we don't start buying the big bulk buys and the big private deals and the estate buyouts. And I will add, which I'm sure I'll get a lot of pushback on, is individual cherry picking. If you're going to individual cherry pick, like let's say online sourcing, 30, $10 to $30 items, I think we shouldn't be doing that until we're more advanced. Because I don't do it a lot, because to me, it's putting a lot of apples in a basket that just might not pan out, or that I might have my money hung up on too long. And if I'm worried about that, then people that aren't not quite maybe to my reselling level really should be worried about it. So I feel that cherry picking individual items, while it's good and it's a good thing to do, but if you're paying up for those items, you get a lot of money tied up in a very small portion of inventory, and that will halt your cash flow. So I'm very careful about paying up and cherry picking inventory. I'm also just now to the point where I'm comfortable doing like estate buyouts. I think people want to get to that quicker than they're ready for it, because it's really easy to see the diamonds on top and not see all the crap underneath, right? So we need to decide, what stage are you in? What sourcing stage are you in? And what changes you can make to your sourcing to better fit where you're at, right? And to get to that point at all, you better know your numbers. What's your average sale price? What's your average cost of goods? We need to reflect all that in our numbers and our math. So if you're after if you're after fees and all that, and your profit's $10 to $12, you probably aren't ready to be cherry picking $20 items. Now, can we get there someday? Yes, but you have to know what you're doing, right? So if you're not confident in your niche and you're not confident when you're picking up, maybe you're an everything seller, but that's fine. But then you need to be confident in your comping skills, right? Because maybe you're picking up industrial stuff that we don't know exactly what it is, but as long as you can comp it correctly on eBay, you're good, you're fine. And I'm okay with that, right? So we have to know all these metrics. You have to know what your sweet spot is for sourcing. And my sweet spot for sourcing has changed dramatically over the years. And right now, I would say my sweet spot for sourcing is people feeding it to me privately and buying estate buyouts. I'm really gotten away from the cherry picking individual items thing, because it just ties up my inventory. It ties up my cash flow too much. And usually it ends up not being worth it, because things shift in the market and you end up tied up in too few of items for not enough turnover. So make sure that we are evaluating every buy. Not every good deal is a good deal. And I run into that a lot, especially with jewelry, things that you can end up with a big box full of it for little money. It's not, kind of like the whole elephant for $1 isn't a good deal if you don't need an elephant, right? So the big, huge box of clothes, or the big, huge box of jewelry, or whatever shoes you're finding, those aren't a good deal if they aren't a fit for you right now. Do you have the curse of the fear of missing out, right? I wish I could just snuff that out of people sometimes, right? I don't have a fear of missing out when I don't need anything right now. I just don't have it. It will come back again. Those opportunities will be there again someday. I get it. If sometimes we have to pile inventory for seasonality with how you source, I understand that, but make sure that's what you're doing and that you're counting up how many days of inventory you have. And you're not just buying because you're afraid to miss out, or you're not just sourcing because you're afraid of missing out on the best things. How can we make better decisions when we're working on that? So we need to decide how often and where are we sourcing? We need to have rules. That doesn't necessarily, notice I didn't say strict budget, because I realize some of you guys do not source with a budget, and that's okay as long as we have the cash flow to do that. But make sure we're tracking all of our return on investments per trip, right? So I get a lot of feedback that everybody seems to know what their cost of goods are in a trip, but do you know what your return on investment is for that trip? Because I can buy a whole table full of dollar jewelry and have a ridiculously low return on my investment, because I gotta list every single one of them. If they're only going to sell for $15 a piece, was it really a deal at $1? Was it really a deal at $2? Right? So we have to know what our return on investment is. So make yourself some sourcing rules, figure out where you're at in the game. And maybe some of us could make some big changes in our sourcing that would make huge differences in our business, right? I really think that that's something I see more often. I think this is one of those topics that's come up really quite often recently, that's made me think about how we need to talk about sourcing more, because it really is the core of our business. And remember that sourcing isn't shopping, right? We're not just mindlessly shopping. And I think remembering that it's not a deal if we don't need it. It's not a deal if it's not a good fit. We need to, I think we've all been in situations where it's like, if I don't jump on this right now, I'm going to miss it. And when I'm in those situations, I make poor decisions for myself a lot of times, because I feel like I have to grab it, or I have to do it, or I'm going to miss it. And then I realize, oh, it's got flaws I didn't see. Or maybe it didn't weigh as much as I thought it would. And it's, I paid for it according to what I thought sterling value was on it. And it just wasn't, or I thought I saw a signature on something, but it turns out the signature doesn't really matter. It was an artisan piece that's not sought after. Those things have all happened ever. I mean, I really feel like you do this long enough, you're going to have it happen to you. So I think reevaluating where we are at in sourcing, instead of constantly worrying about where we're going to find our stuff, is a good topic. So I appreciate you guys listening to me ramble about sourcing one more time. You'll have to hear it again. I'm absolutely certain of it. But check us out on Reseller Revenue on Patreon if you'd like more information on it. And we're also on Instagram and Facebook.